we're going to move on to our mailbag segment. We got some mailbag questions, including one that actually came from Zamora BSB on Twitter. And
Really?
so we'll just kind of go around and get through these mailbag questions. The first one is from Zamora BSB on Twitter. And Zamora asked, what made you guys fall in love with the game and specifically with the Denver Nuggets? Will.
Okay. Well, I am from Denver, so there was that. I also followed other teams, much like Zamora, like at a younger age. Like I loved Allen Iverson. I loved Shaq and Kobe. So I did have I had a Magic Shaq jersey and a Lakers Shaq jersey. But I still would follow the Nuggets and hope that they would be good, like when Melo was here and all that. But I fell way more in love with the Nuggets once Jokic joined because he's just like a magical player. Like, when have you ever seen anyone like him? And I just remember, I don't remember when he joined, what I was doing when he joined the team. It was too long ago. I was probably like I was still in college or something like that. But I was not paying too much attention to the Nuggets. My brother was like, there's this Serbian dude on the team who throws these crazy passes. So like the Nuggets are going to be great now. That's what really did it for me with the Nuggets.
Oh, yeah, for sure. And your brother has good taste, right? So
Yeah.
I've talked about this a little bit. I got into the Nuggets last year during the playoffs, and I was rooting for them to beat the Timberwolves because I didn't like the Wolves for some reason. But the series that really like solidified my fandom for the Nuggets was really the Suns series, especially that game one, like Jamal and all of the fire that he brought. Obviously, Jokic was just like incredible. But on top of that, I really do think Jamal is like the soul of this team because of like how amazing it is when he's on. Because when he's on, it just like brings a different energy to the team and to the fan base. Cool. So our next question comes from Lucas Kaplan.
Hold on.
I'm sorry.
I want to get one so Zamora can participate with this question.
I get to participate in my own question?
I know, but I just want to ask one follow-up on, because I know we went through his background and all that, but was there like a moment with this current Nuggets team in like the Jokic era where you like knew we had a chance to win a championship, or you remember being like, whoa, the Nuggets are going to be on another level?
The stretch after the AG trade.
Oh, okay.
When we got AG, because I loved AG before. Like I was like upset that the Magic, I felt like they just didn't do enough for him. In retrospect, like that was kind of dumb. Like I think they kind of did everything they could, but I just was like, he could be a superstar. They're just not treating him right and all this stuff. Like he just has to go to a good team. And then he came here. So I was like really excited when he got here. There were fireworks, man. Those first, 9 games were just like insane. You know, beating the brakes off the Clippers when the Clippers were like the scariest team in the league. Man, yeah. And then Jamal went down, unfortunately.
Yeah, what a time to really get into like be super hopeful about the Nuggets.
Yeah, to see that, like just seeing that team and then just have it taken away from you for 2 years was just like heartbreaking.
It was brutal. All right, let's go to Lucas Kaplan's question now, Grace.
So Lucas Kaplan asks, what could be the next league-wide tactical trend that teams start to embrace? And he said it could be as specific as guards in the dunker spot or size, like we've seen recently.
I think that teams are going to just purely focus on bringing in playoff caliber players. So basically just they're going to focus really hard on finding players who are capable of playing on both sides of the ball and just not being specialists. I think like the specialist role is going to kind of die out. I just think there's no room for it anymore. I think like if you look at the Lakers series, these past 2 years that we've played against them, people were just like tearing Darvin Hams to shreds. And like, granted, he wasn't a good coach, but at the same time, like Pelinka didn't give him the tools necessary to like be a really good team. Whenever it came down to clutch time, you had to like choose between like D'Angelo Russell or Jared Vanderbilt. You know, it's like, you want a guy who can't defend anybody, or do you want a guy who's not going to score any, that can just be left alone on offense? So I just think teams are just going to kind of, trend more towards that, at least, contending teams and like teams that are really focused on like trying to win now, you know?
Yeah.
So actually, it's kind of related to this because I do think that teams are going to try to have guys that can play on both sides of the ball on the floor at all times, particularly for their playoff rotations. And I think that that's one of the ways that the Boston Celtics have been able to be so successful. We talked a bit about, having multiple ball handlers on the floor, but even just having guys out there who can do something on offense, like say a Sam Hauser, who's a movement shooter. In relation to that, I think that for so long, since the really like prime LeBron years, the emphasis on offense in the NBA has been to try to get two on the ball, try to get the defense in rotation, and defenses trying to resist that in many ways. The small ball era, switch everything, all of that. But I actually think that defensively, one of the biggest changes we're going to see is defenses starting to embrace being in rotation. Not meant Some teams already do. I think the Nuggets are actually best defensively when they're flying around. I think that we saw in the NBA finals for the one game Dallas was good. Yeah, they were containing the ball well, but it was a lot of team defense that was involved in that game. And that's how you defend a team like the Boston Celtics. Is just you're going to need a lot of endurance. You're going to need big guys with enough athleticism to cover ground, and you're going to need, like you described earlier, Zamora, that high level communication and chemistry defensively. And I think defenses starting to embrace existing in rotation more is going to be a lot more prevalent than we may think now because of how these offenses are evolving. Yeah, what about you, Will?
Yeah, mine kind of then bridges from you, where I was kind of riffing off the original question about like guards in the dunker spot and size, where it's like can be in the dunker spot when your other wings or forwards can dribble, because that's usually who's taking it in, and then because that guard's down there, the low man, whoever's there, is not a rim protector type because it's probably a guard. So I know the NBA is a copycat league. And originally, we kind of thought with the Warriors that it'd be this small ball, like point guard, everyone shoots threes kind of setup, which kind of happened. But then you get like the Jokic and the bigs who can play make, who do multiple things like Joel Embiid, which is harder to find. You can't just like find those people. You can't just replicate that. So now I'm thinking more the easier thing to kind of replicate is like the Celtics and like kind of like you're saying, where these offenses are evolving in this way where you have players with size who can defend and shoot threes, but can also like dribble, unless and like can ball handle and play make. And I think a lot of people
It's like
adapted.
all around
Yeah,
perfect basketball
Yeah.
players.
yeah. It's just
Yeah.
like everyone kind of adapted the 3-point shot. They were like, put the 3-point shot in your game for spacing. Now it's going to be like, put ball handling in your game. And now it's like we're going to have all these players who could do, and we're going to be leaning more into positionless basketball, unless you're like those super specific like Jokic or like a Kyrie, or you're just like so good at what you do that it doesn't really matter like whether you're huge or whether you're a little smaller, you're going to be played because you're lethal on offense. But I think it's trending towards like a Jaylen Brown, Jason Tatum type archetype.
Yeah. I
You know,
think, cause like I have a friend, I don't know if you guys follow him, but shout out P Watt Muse. He's one of my friends on Twitter. But he plays rugby, and I don't know anything about rugby. And he was explaining it to me one day, and it's kind of the same thing. He was like, I was like, so explain to me the difference between like football, like American football and rugby. And he's like, in rugby, everybody has to be good at everything. He's like, like an offensive lineman in football might be good at specific things, but he's not going to be able to outrun everybody when he gets the ball. Everybody has to be able to do everything. And I think it's similar to what we're saying here is like people are just going to start drafting basketball players. They're not going to draft a shooter. They're not going to draft a big man. They're not going to draft a point guard. They're going to draft basketball players, a guy who can do pretty much a little bit of everything.
Who can hoop. Yeah.
Who can hoop.
and players are just getting better as it goes along. So I could see it.
Yeah.
I will say too, sort of related to this and like the defense point too. One of the things I was watching some WNBA, and I think I was watching the Aces play. Maybe it was the Mercury. Anyway, The announcers were talking about how this team had a really high field goal percentage on the game, but they were down like double digits because I believe it was the Aces had forced so many turnovers. And it reminded me of our series against the Suns last year, where the Suns shot over 50% from the field most of that series, but most of those games were blowouts because we were winning the possession battle through rebounding and also forcing turnovers. And I just think that fly around mentality, like defense is so much less about just like lowering the effective field goal percentage of the other team, although it also helps if you can force misses on shots, but just winning that possession battle. And one of the ways to do that is forcing, turnovers. And a lot of that is ball pressure and rotations and communication and all of that as well. And, being a well-rounded player stops you from, let's say like Jaylen Brown got a lot better. I wouldn't like his handle did get a little bit better, but one of the things that we saw from him this year was that he was a lot better at making that quick read for that next pass when defenders were like helping onto him. So that there's like this back and forth, right? This tension between like these skilled players that also have to improve their feel and their IQ, combating these defenses that are now trying to just make every aspect of the offensive possession as difficult as possible. And it's interesting to watch. I've never been so enthralled with NBA defense before in my life. Okay, so our next question comes from Bucket Since 88 on Twitter. He asks, which team from either conference that isn't a contender, so 7 seed or lower, do you anticipate making the biggest internal leap and or vault themselves upward the most? Basically, who do you think will be the next year's Thunder? And I included like the Magic as an example of this as well this year, the Pacers, those kinds of teams. Zamora.
Oh, congrats on being our guest. You have to go first on every.
Oh, yeah. So it's funny that you were actually just talking about like how you anticipate defense or like, the defensive roles to go from like embracing rotations and stuff like that and just being able to fly around and stuff like that. That's a big reason why I'm so high on Houston. I think Houston is going to take a big jump next year. I think they're going to be legit scary for a lot of teams because just cumulative athleticism wise, I don't know if there's another team as good as them. Like between Amen Thompson, Jalen Green, Tari Eason, Jabari, like they just have wings on wings. And Ime is like the perfect coach for that. I'm such a big Ime guy. Like I just think he's like legit one of the best coaches in the NBA. Like you go and you take the Celtics who were like at the time being, like had bad defensive tendencies and stuff like that. And then came in and flipped them to turning them into one of the best defenses. And it's like still a foundation that they're built on right now. He's gone for a little bit of time, comes back, coaches Houston and turns all these guys who are just pure athletes and like pretty much nothing else into like this fly around, crazy good defense that just like gets in everybody's faces and just ball pressures, doesn't ever give you any space to breathe, is always up in your jersey. I just think they're going to be like a really scary team next year. They got the number 3 pick in the draft this year. If they draft either Reese Shea or Reed Shepherd, like they're going to add more shooting. If any of their guys take a jump in their shooting, if Amen can learn to shoot a little bit, if Tari can learn to shoot a little bit, that's just going to make them way more dangerous. Şengün coming back is going to be huge. He has the potential to be an MVP caliber player, in my opinion. Like he's so good, that guy. I think Jalen Green, I'm high on Jalen Green, higher than most. I think like I'm not a big Jalen Green guy. Yeah.
He's a ridiculous athlete.
It's
just
really
like
is.
We got to get the consistency and the IQ to catch up to
He's just got to buy into Ime's system and culture and all that stuff, I think if they can coach him right, like, put the right mentality into that kid, the sky's the limit for him.
That is a good answer. I think that's probably one of the better answers. I'm looking at this and I'm either like, besides Rockets, because I definitely agree with you, I'm going like either Heat, maybe Spurs.
Something like that. Spurs can get a good point guard.
Yeah.
Or just some type of identity. Like the
Oh
coolest thing about
man.
the Spurs is like Wemby is so versatile that you can do anything you want with him. Like
Yeah.
literally anything.
And they were looking pretty good at the end of the season. Like when
Yeah.
they didn't have much to play for, obviously they were just like, well, they obviously fucked up our chances a little bit.
They weren't
But
even playing anybody but Wemby in that game either. So
Yeah,
I
like he didn't
know.
rest, but like the rest of their starting lineup was playing.
hmm
Yeah.
Well, it's like,
That
you
was
know, the
ridiculous.
Grizzlies are going to be back because Jaw's going to be back. So I don't like consider that necessarily like a leap.
Yeah.
But like the Heat, like they,
I could say that. I could see that though.
yeah,
I mean,
they're going to be good. You know, they're not going to be
yeah,
as
they're
bad
gonna
as
be
they
good.
were. The Heat, if they like
So
get
yeah,
someone
with
or
the Heat, how's
something.
that different than the Grizzlies?
Well, because like I mean, the Heat didn't have any. Who was like their biggest injury? Like it wasn't like Jimmy was
They
out the
had
whole
injuries throughout the
season.
entire. I think their
Kind
most
of just
played
got with stuff
lineup
like
only
this.
played 100 minutes last year because they had so many injuries
hmm
just throughout the
Just
year, and then
everything was
obviously
just
Jimmy
nagging.
was a big one at the end,
Yeah,
That was something.
especially.
Yeah.
I think it's just like I'm relying on the Heat ethos where they attract people, they can make big moves. I know like free agency's over, so it's like they're not going to just like get people walking in there like they used to have. But I could just see them doing something that kind of gets them back to where they're like a top 3 seed next season in the East as opposed to like the 8th seed. Because I think they're, you know, like they were the 8th seed last year and they went all the way to the finals, which was great. But I think like they're seeing more the reality of this team, and I think that they're not going to wait around and just like let this team be the same. I think there's going to be some changes.
Yeah, Riley's not gonna settle on them
Yeah.
being, you know.
I don't know. I think Riley's been. I think his reputation precedes him. Is all I'll say. I do think that like Jimmy for Paul George would be a hilarious sign and trade though.
Mm,
Okay, so I'm gonna copy Zamora's answer because I do think it's Houston. They were an incredibly formidable home team this season. I believe they were a top 4 home team in the conference in a very tough conference. They gave us problems. We went like what was it, 1-3 against them in the season series. And that was especially because of the defense. But I do think that another year is going to just improve their offensive chemistry and their shooting could just improve because they were a below average shooting team last year. And that could just get better. Maybe they make some moves to, I don't know, get a movement shooter or try to improve the spot up guys. But their bench minutes really suffer because of the backup point guard and backup big situations. I don't know if they're going to use Steven Adams this year or they're going to try to trade him in the offseason. But I think that's another just place that they can make an improvement because those backup units are very hit or miss for such a young team. But I do think that the defense is going to hold. They actually dropped off toward the end of the year, but they were a top 5 defense for large stretches of last season. And I think that Ime could just kind of get them to be more consistent on the road. And then we're looking at a team that could contend for a top 4, top 5 seed in the West next year, maybe out of nowhere. And we saw for a while there, they were firmly in the playoff picture despite their road record because their home record was so good. Then they kind of fell. And then it was really about like, are they going to keep the Warriors out of the play-in or not? But I think they're going to go into next season with a lot of confidence.
Yeah, they're super
Okay.
young.
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
yeah.
Okay, so our last question comes from Dan Favali. He asked if you can pick any 5 players in the league who would populate your most ideal small ball lineups, who would they be? I'll go first to give you guys a little break on this one. My ideal small ball lineup involves Jokic at center, Tatum at 4, Aaron Nesmith at the 3, Steph at point guard, and SGA at shooting guard. I think we have just enough length to
mm,
satisfy my needs in a lineup. And he asked this question because I have my qualms with small ball because I don't think that most teams really have the personnel to implement it well consistently. But obviously, in this made up lineup, everybody can dribble, pass, and shoot. And we're not sacrificing too much size.
Wait, so can Jokic count as small ball?
Yeah. Your small ball can still
Yeah.
include a real center as long as you're not going like super big. I think I'm actually undersized at every position except 5 and 2.
If you think your team is undersized, my team is going to be really undersized.
All point guard lineup. Let's go.
Mine is Stephen Curry at the point, I went with Derek White at the 2. I went Anthony Edwards at the 3. I went J-Dub at the 4, and I went Draymond at the 5.
Okay.
I went
Whoa.
essentially like true small ball. As I try to make it as small yet competitive as I could. So everybody is a pretty good defender. I mean, Steph is, good compared to what he used to be. I think Ant is like, strong enough that he can contend
Yeah.
with most threes.
Yeah.
Jada plays the 4 as it is. Draymond, really small guy, but he holds his own against these giants. I don't know how he does it. Blows my mind. And then Steph is like the greatest small ball player probably ever.
Yeah. Got to give that to him.
Oh
Will.
man, I'm also gonna leave Jokic off just because I feel like if you're employing this small ball lineup, the opposing team's gonna play a bigger player. They're not gonna leave some small dudes out there that Jokic is gonna cook. So I'm just gonna, for this thought experiment, go with.
Who are you facing that Jokic can't just also cook?
Well, yeah, I know, but it's like I feel like some of the advantages of small ball is that like you're kind of forcing the other team to have to go a similar direction, because it's like if you have a smaller team out there, they can't like keep up with the speed and such, and so like if you're trying to force them to not have like a big rim protector type person out there. So I'm like, if we're just playing Jokic, then the other team's probably just gonna like keep a big dude out there as opposed to like trying to put in like a Nas Reed type, and Jokic is gonna cook him even worse than who would be like a bigger, stouter player. You know what I'm saying?
I'm still like, I think Jokic is cooking in my lineup because he has
Yeah.
spacing up the wazoo.
Yeah.
And if they try, he's going to cook whoever in one-on-one coverage with all that space. And
Yeah,
if they
it's
try
true.
to send help, it's just curtains.
He's playing against Cat and Rudy Gobert.
We're cooking. We're cooking. Okay.
You just pick the GOAT, all right? That's
Yeah.
all. That's all you got to say. Is I picked the GOAT on my team,
Yeah.
and
Oh man.
But Will, why don't you share your lineup?
I'm gonna go with like Steph, Drew Holiday, Luca, something like Jason Tatum, and then LeBron. LeBron playing center.
nice. Okay.
Okay. That's
I like
3
that.
small
Yeah.
forwards.
Hell yeah.
I actually,
This is the trend that I want the NBA to get to.
I feel like mine is cooking yours, but
Yeah. Well, I mean, if this is the matchup, yeah, then I'm
well,
probably
we
gonna
both
be
have
cooked.
Tatum. So I was gonna say Tatum can guard LeBron. Who's guarding Tatum on my team? I could put Neesmith on Tatum some. We'll let him score. Turn Tatum into a scorer. We'll see how that turns out.
It's a fun experiment. That was a good question, and I like that Dan has forced you into contemplating more small ball
Yeah,
concepts.
I was going to say that.
Even my small ball is actually medium ball.
Yeah. You're using like the
All
one
right.
cheat code of Jokic to get out of this.
All right. So thank you, Zamora, for joining us for this offseason overview and for our mailbag. I wanted to just let the listeners know to look out for our next episodes dealing with the Nuggets offseason. We have a draft preview coming up with CT Fazio, who we talked about a little bit as our Nuggets Twitter draft guru. And we'll discuss even more about the types of prospects that Denver will be looking at in the draft next week. And then after the draft, we will have a review of how the draft went for Nuggets, and maybe we'll talk about some of the selections of other teams as well. Will, do you want to take us out?
Yes, but before I do that, Zamora, tell people listening where they can find
yes.
you and about your other podcasts and anything else that you want to plug.
Plug everything.
All right. The big screen. So on YouTube at Talking BS, go and subscribe there. That is where I'm doing all these off-season previews, and I just talk sports, period, over there. I host a podcast with my brothers, Oso and Jake. It's called the Box State Boys Podcast. It has nothing to do with sports, and it's just a whole lot of bullshit where we just crack jokes and talk about our lives and, all that stuff. So it's just a fun podcast, just messing around. Yeah. And then I just started a TikTok. So if you guys like more of the quick content, talking.bs, where you can find my big board I'm releasing right now. yeah, that's all the places you can find me. Go follow me and subscribe.
Yes. Well, thank you again for joining us. That's it for us. So if you've made it this far, like and subscribe and turn the notification bell on YouTube and leave a rating on any podcast platforms that you're listening to. We're still trying to get on Apple Podcasts. And just remember that winning is fun and losing sucks.